Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
Last summer, I found myself locked in a battle I never anticipated, defending my own property against an entitled neighbor. It began innocently enough when Karen moved into the house next door. She was a professional in her late 30s, juggling a demanding job and parenting her two young children. Karen initially seemed friendly, the kind of neighbor who greets you warmly and occasionally shares baked treats. However, her demeanor shifted drastically when she discovered the private park I owned at the edge of our cul-de-sac. The park is a serene acre of green space that includes old maple trees, a small pond, and a playground. My late father left it to me, and it's been a personal mission of mine to maintain it for the neighborhood's enjoyment. Though it is private property, I've always welcomed respectful use of the space. A simple sign at the entrance reads, "Private property, use at your own risk." For years, this arrangement worked beautifully until Karen arrived. At first, Karen and her children used the park like anyone else, but it wasn't long before her sense of entitlement began to surface. She started hosting play dates without notifying me, left trash behind, and allowed her dog to roam unleashed. I approached her politely, reminding her of the park's private status. She always responded with a dismissive nod, but nothing changed. The situation escalated one Saturday afternoon when I was trimming hedges near the park's playground. Karen stormed over, visibly annoyed, with her children trailing behind. "Could you wrap this up?" she demanded. "We're hosting a barbecue here, and your noise is ruining it." Taken aback, I replied, "I wasn't aware you had planned an event. This is my property. Next time, please ask for permission." Karen's expression turned icy. "A park is for everyone. You can't just claim it as yours." "Actually, I can," I countered. "I have the deed to prove it." "We'll see about that," she snapped, storming off to make a phone call. Moments later, she returned, threatening to involve the police if I didn't leave her alone. True to her word, Karen called the police. When the officer arrived, I presented the property deed. The officer verified my ownership and explained the situation to Karen, advising her to respect the park's private status. She begrudgingly complied, but it was clear this was far from over. In the following weeks, Karen's antics escalated. She began posting signs reserving parts of the park for mommy group meetings and decorating trees with balloons. When I removed her additions, she retaliated by rallying some neighbors to her cause. They argued that the park should be public given its long-standing community use. Karen even claimed her lawyer uncle was building a legal case to challenge my ownership. Despite her efforts, I remained resolute. I installed a new prominent sign clarifying the park's rules and engaged a lawyer to prepare for potential legal action. Karen's so-called case was quickly dismissed due to my clear documentation. However, tensions reached a boiling point when Karen organized a protest. Over 20 neighbors gathered, chanting slogans like "Parks for People." It felt surreal. The police intervened once again, and Karen's claims were publicly debunked. Many neighbors who had joined the protest felt embarrassed and apologized privately. Karen, however, remained defiant, muttering threats about lawsuits and community action. Determined to find a resolution, I proposed forming a neighborhood association to manage the park collaboratively. At a community meeting, I presented the idea. Members could contribute to maintenance costs and have a say in park rules, while I retain ownership to ensure its preservation. Surprisingly, even Karen showed up. Though skeptical, she ultimately agreed to join the association after seeing the majority of neighbors support the plan. Over the next few months, the association flourished. We organized events, installed new equipment, and fostered a sense of shared responsibility. Karen became one of the most active members, channeling her passion into planning community movie nights and cleanup drives. Looking back, the ordeal taught me a valuable lesson about resilience and compromise. The park, once a battleground, is now a cherished community hub, and my father's legacy has not only endured, but grown stronger. Karen and I even laugh about our initial clash occasionally, proof that sometimes the most unexpected conflicts can lead to meaningful connections. Despite the neighborhood association's initial success, the underlying tension between Karen and me wasn't entirely resolved. While she had embraced her role as an active member, her lingering resentment occasionally surfaced. One particular incident reignited the conflict and threatened to unravel the progress we had made. It started innocuously enough. Karen proposed hosting a community festival in the park to celebrate the upcoming spring season. She envisioned food stalls, live music, and games for the kids. The idea was met with enthusiasm, and the association approved the plan with one caveat. Karen needed to coordinate with me for logistical details as I still retained ownership of the property. At first, Karen seemed cooperative. She approached me with a list of activities and asked for my input. I appreciated her effort and approved most of her suggestions, making only minor adjustments to ensure the event wouldn't cause damage to the park. However, Karen's enthusiasm quickly turned into overreach. Without consulting me, she hired a landscaping company to beautify the park ahead of the festival. When I arrived one morning to find workers digging up sections of grass and planting rows of flowers, I was furious. "Karen," I said, finding her supervising the workers, "what is this? You didn't mention anything about landscaping." She looked up from her clipboard, her expression a mix of annoyance and feigned innocence. "Oh, this? I thought it would be a nice surprise. The park could use a little sprucing up, don't you think?" "It's not about whether the park needs it," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "You didn't have permission to do this. This is still private property." Karen's smile faltered. "David, this is for the good of the community. Why are you being so controlling?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to be controlling, Karen, but this is my land, and any changes need to go through me. What if the plants you've chosen don't thrive here or require expensive maintenance?" "Then I'll handle it," she snapped. "You're always so worried about control. Maybe you should let someone else take charge for once." The argument drew the attention of a few neighbors, who approached cautiously to see what was happening. Realizing that escalating the situation further would only create more drama, I stepped back and told Karen we'd discuss the matter at the next association meeting. At the meeting, the issue sparked heated debate. Some members sided with Karen, arguing that her initiative showed dedication and vision for the park's future. Others supported me, pointing out that her actions violated the agreed-upon protocols and undermined the collaborative spirit of the association. "This isn't just about flowers," I said, addressing the group. "It's about respecting boundaries and following the processes we all agreed on. If we let this slide, what's to stop someone else from making bigger changes without approval?" Karen countered, "I'm not trying to take over. I just want what's best for the park. Sometimes you have to act decisively to make improvements." The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but it was clear the disagreement had left the group divided. Over the next few weeks, Karen's landscaping project became a symbol of the underlying power struggle between us. Some neighbors praised her initiative, while others resented her unilateral decisions. The tension reached a breaking point on the day of the festival. Despite our earlier arguments, the event was a resounding success. Families filled the park, enjoying the games, food, and live music. Karen basked in the praise, taking credit for the vibrant atmosphere. Yet as the day wore on, it became clear that she had once again overstepped. Around midday, I noticed a group of vendors setting up near the pond. Curious, I approached and asked who had authorized their presence. They pointed to Karen, who had invited them to sell their goods without consulting me or the association. The vendors' tents and equipment were damaging the park's delicate grass, and I could already see litter beginning to accumulate around their stalls. Furious, I confronted Karen in front of a small crowd of attendees. "Karen, we agreed to keep this event simple. What are these vendors doing here?" She rolled her eyes. "Relax, David. They're just adding to the festival's atmosphere. Besides, they're donating a portion of their profits to the association." "That's not the point," I said firmly. "You've once again made decisions without consulting anyone. This isn't your park to manage as you please." Our argument drew the attention of more neighbors, some of whom began to voice their frustrations. What should have been a joyous occasion devolved into a public airing of grievances. The festival ended on a sour note, with several attendees leaving early and the park littered with trash. Afterward, I knew something had to change. The current arrangement wasn't working, and Karen's continued overreach was jeopardizing both the park's integrity and the neighborhood's harmony. It was time to take decisive action to restore balance, even if it meant risking further conflict. In the aftermath of the disastrous spring festival, the tension between Karen and me reached new heights. The park, once a tranquil retreat, now felt like a battleground, with divided neighbors taking sides. It became clear that the current arrangement was unsustainable, and I decided it was time to reevaluate the structure of the neighborhood association. First, I called an emergency meeting with the board to address the escalating conflict. To my surprise, Karen arrived with a stack of papers and a determined expression. She seemed ready for a fight, but I had no intention of letting the meeting spiral into another shouting match. Before we begin, I said, standing at the head of the table, I want to acknowledge that we all share a common goal, ensuring the park remains a valuable asset to our community. However, recent events have highlighted flaws in our current system, and we need to address them if we're going to move forward. Karen immediately interjected. The only flaw is your need for control, David. You refuse to let the rest of us have a say in how the park is run. I took a deep breath, determined to keep my composure. That's not entirely true, Karen. I've always been open to suggestions, but there's a difference between offering input and making unilateral decisions that affect everyone. The room fell silent as I outlined my proposal for a revised governance structure. Under the new plan, the association would form a dedicated park committee responsible for day-to-day operations. The committee would handle event planning, maintenance, and community outreach, while I retained veto power to prevent any actions that might compromise the park's integrity. This would strike a balance between community involvement and the need for oversight as the legal owner. Karen's expression shifted from defiance to cautious interest. "And how do we know you won't abuse this veto power?" she asked. "The veto would be limited to cases where proposed actions conflict with legal, environmental, or safety concerns," as I explained. "Any disagreements would be resolved through mediation with a neutral third party." The board members exchanged glances, murmuring their approval. One neighbor, Mrs. Chen, spoke up. "This seems like a fair compromise. It'll give everyone a voice while ensuring the park remains well managed." Despite Karen's initial resistance, the board voted unanimously to implement the new system. Over the next few weeks, the park committee was established, with Karen among its members. I hoped this shared responsibility would help rebuild trust and reduce tensions. For a while, it seemed to work. The committee held regular meetings, organized small events, and even coordinated a successful cleanup day that brought the neighborhood together. Karen appeared to embrace her role, often proposing creative ideas that were well received by the group. I started to believe we had finally turned a corner, but the peace was short-lived. One morning, I received a frantic call from another committee member, Greg. He informed me that Karen had independently authorized a commercial fitness group to hold classes in the park without consulting the committee or me. The group had set up large equipment near the pond, trampling flower beds and leaving tire tracks in the grass. I immediately headed to the park and found Karen overseeing the class as if she were running the show. "Karen," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, "what is going on here?" She turned to me unfazed. "The fitness group is paying a fee to use the space. It's a great way to generate funds for the park." "Did you get approval for this?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Karen crossed her arms. "It didn't seem necessary. We're just trying to help the community." "By damaging the property and ignoring the rules," I shot back. "This is exactly why we established the committee, to avoid these kinds of unauthorized actions." The confrontation drew the attention of several neighbors, some of whom sided with Karen, while others voiced their frustration at her overreach. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, I decided to involve the committee in resolving the issue. At the next meeting, emotions ran high as the incident was discussed. Karen defended her actions, claiming she had the park's best interests at heart. Others accused her of undermining the committee's authority and disregarding the rules. After hours of debate, the committee voted to revoke Karen's authority to make independent decisions regarding park activities. Though visibly upset, Karen begrudgingly accepted the decision. For a time, she stepped back from her role, and the park committee functioned more smoothly. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's retreat was temporary. She remained a wild card, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she found another way to stir up trouble. As I locked the park gate that evening, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a permanent solution to this ongoing battle. While the park had brought the neighborhood together in many ways, it had also revealed deep divisions that weren't easily mended. The question lingered in my mind: could peace truly be achieved, or was this conflict destined to simmer indefinitely? Despite the temporary reprieve after Karen's authority was revoked, the tension lingered like a storm cloud over the neighborhood. I thought perhaps the conflict would fizzle out on its own, but Karen's defiance soon returned in full force, pushing the situation to its breaking point. It started with small acts of rebellion. Karen began subtly undermining the committee's work by spreading rumors about favoritism and accusing me of homeowner association arding decision-making power. She recruited a small group of neighbors who felt the park should be entirely public, and together they circulated a petition demanding the park's ownership be turned over to the local government. The petition was a blatant attempt to strip me of my rights, and while it garnered some support, many neighbors were reluctant to sign, fearing the park would lose its charm under government control. When Karen realized the petition wouldn't gain enough traction, she escalated her tactics. One Saturday morning, I awoke to find spray-painted graffiti across the new park sign that read, "Parks belong to everyone." Trash was strewn across the lawn, and one of the playground swings had been deliberately broken. It was the most blatant act of vandalism the park had ever seen. Furious, I called the police to file a report. Officer Martinez arrived within the hour, inspecting the damage with a somber expression. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I can't prove it, but I have my suspicions," I replied, thinking of Karen and her increasingly hostile rhetoric. Officer Martinez nodded. "We'll document everything and increase patrols in the area. If you install cameras, it could help deter future incidents and provide evidence if something like this happens again." Taking his advice, I had surveillance cameras installed around the park that same week. The vandalism didn't stop, but the cameras provided clear footage of the culprits, Karen's teenage son and a group of his friends. When confronted with the evidence, Karen denied any involvement, claiming her son was acting independently. "He's just a kid," she said defensively. "This isn't a crime, it's a statement. Maybe you should consider why so many people feel excluded from the park." I couldn't believe her audacity. "A statement? Karen, this isn't activism. It's destruction of property. If you don't take responsibility, I'll have no choice but to press charges." True to my word, I filed charges against the teenagers for vandalism. The case forced Karen to confront the consequences of her actions, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. She organized a protest in front of my house, complete with signs and chants accusing me of being a tyrant and a selfish gatekeeper. For days, the protest disrupted the peace of the neighborhood. The local news even picked up the story, framing it as a dramatic clash between individual property rights and community interests. I felt the weight of public opinion turning against me, even though I knew I was in the right. It seemed like Karen was determined to make my life as difficult as possible. Finally, I decided enough was enough. I contacted my lawyer, Jake, and we drafted a formal cease and desist letter, warning Karen that any further harassment or defamation would result in legal action. I also called a neighborhood meeting to address the situation head-on. The meeting was tense. Karen's supporters showed up in force, but so did many neighbors who were tired of the conflict. I stood before the group, determined to set the record straight. "I've always tried to maintain this park as a space for everyone to enjoy," I began, "but recent events have made it clear that we need to establish firmer boundaries. This is private property, and while I'm happy to share it, I won't tolerate disrespect or vandalism. If these actions continue, I'll have no choice but to restrict access entirely." Karen's supporters murmured angrily, but one neighbor, Mrs. Chen, stood up to speak. "David's right. We've let this get out of hand. The park has always been a gift to the neighborhood, and we should be grateful instead of tearing each other apart." Her words seemed to resonate, and the crowd's hostility began to wane. Karen, however, remained defiant. "This isn't over," she said as the meeting adjourned. Over the next few weeks, the tension slowly eased. The cameras deterred further vandalism, and Karen's protest fizzled out as her supporters lost interest. The park committee resumed its work, and I began to see glimpses of the community spirit that had once defined our neighborhood. One evening, Karen knocked on my door unexpectedly. She looked tired and uncharacteristically humble. "David Martin," she began, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. I let my emotions get the better of me, and I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused." I was stunned, but appreciated her honesty. "Thank you, Karen. It means a lot to hear that." She nodded. "I still think the park should be more open to everyone, but I realize now that I went about it the wrong way. I'd like to work with you to find a solution that benefits everyone." Her words marked a turning point. Together, we began discussing ways to improve the park's accessibility while preserving its integrity. The Neighborhood Association adopted new guidelines for events and activities, and ensuring transparency and collaboration. Slowly but surely, the wounds began to heal. A year later, the park was thriving like never before. Karen had become one of its strongest advocates, using her energy to organize successful events that brought the community closer together. The conflicts of the past were a distant memory, replaced by a sense of unity and mutual respect. As I watched families laughing and playing under the shade of the park's ancient trees, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. What had started as a bitter feud had ultimately strengthened our neighborhood, proving that even the most divisive conflicts can lead to growth and understanding if approached with patience and determination. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.